Hi everyone, Dr. Kate's here. Excited that everyone is joining for our first Teach Me Sex. Hi everyone. Okay, I'm gonna bring in our guest, Dr. Sam. Let's see. Go live. Oh, there we are. Hey, Dr.
Hi,
Sam. How's it
how are you
going?
today?
I'm good. I'm good. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
This will be our first Teach Me Sex for the year. So
I'm
we're,
super excited about
I
it. I feel like
know.
now's a great time. Everyone's kind of like indoors again. And so like why not learn a little bit about, new year, new sexual intimacy in a lot of different ways.
Yes, exactly. We are getting back indoors, and that's always like
Hopefully temporarily.
hopefully temporarily, and maybe we can snuggle up or not. Who knows,
Yeah.
right?
Or self-snuggle.
Correct. Or so that's a fun one.
Yeah.
Well, great. So I'll just do a little intro to kind of remind us all what Teach Me Sex is about, and then we're going to jump into it, okay?
Okay, great.
All right. So the Teach Me Sex series is an educational series to learn about all the different ways humans have sex, express their sexuality, and the joys and complications of connecting with others. So we ask the same 5 questions every time. And while we are highlighting diverse ways of engagement and different experiences, I also want to encourage listeners to consider ways that you may relate and how some of what you might hear helps you understand yourself a little bit better. And the Teach Me Sex is explicit, we're honest, we're intimate, and we want to disclose that not everyone publicly shares about themselves as sexual beings. And actually, most people don't, and that's totally okay. That doesn't mean that they're not sexual or they aren't empowered by their sexuality. But on the other side, for us, let's not sexualize people that do share or asexualize people who don't, or generalize what we hear today to other people who may share identities with our guests. And we're delighted by our guests who use self-disclosure as a form of education. And that's why we're all here today, is because Dr. Sam and I use, because of our expertise, we also use self-disclosure as a form of education. And we know that education is a part of our professional and personal missions. So Teach Me Sex is all about the more you know, the more you know. And so today we have Dr. Sam from Indigo Physiotherapy, and we're so glad that you're here with us today. Thanks for joining. Thanks for teaching us. Want to just start off with, tell us about yourself. Tell us what we need to know about you.
So, fun fact, I actually got a bachelor's degree in education before I became a PT. And so I feel like, and although it was Spanish education, it gave me a really good background on how to educate my clients. And to this day, I feel like one of the most important things that I do on a day to day basis is education. And it's a huge part of who I am as a PT. So I'm Dr. Sam. I am the owner and founder of Indigo Physiotherapy. We have 4 locations in the Maryland area now and a whole bunch of wonderful practitioners. Our kind of mainstay is pelvic physical therapy, which ranges from treating incontinence to pelvic pain to tailbone pain, prenatal, postpartum, infertility, issues through menopause, post hysterectomy, cancer. We treat all genders, all people, all sizes, all ages. And then we have uh, other people in our group that also work with this population of people, which includes lactation consultants, craniosacral therapists, body workers, etc. So I kind of started Indigo because I felt like what I was really looking for in traditional healthcare for treatment with my clients didn't exist there. And so I had to create it kind of from the ground up. And finding a space that was trauma aware and pleasing to the senses and didn't feel like a traditional medical, with fluorescent lights and the white sheets and, you know, this amount of time, so we could really get hands-on with our clients for a significant amount of time. Also, I felt like the more that I did it, the more I realized that people just had no idea what this was or what options there were. And I think, you know, Kate, you and I have kind of connected over time because we have a lot of clients that are like, oh, I didn't know that sex was not supposed to be,
Yeah.
or I didn't know these parts, or, you know, all across the board. So that's kind of in a nutshell who I am, as kind of the cheerleader behind Indigo and pelvic health.
That's awesome. And I do want to say too, the way that you've designed your clinic is like, you know, making the effort to not be so clinical and not be so sterile. And that can be sometimes like very triggering for people. But the environment that you've like created in your clinics, on your Instagram, like it's a very welcoming environment.
We've tried really hard to make it that way. I had a client when I first started out about 6 years ago who was going through, she had radiation of her vulvar area, and she had a lot of restrictions and was unable to have sex. And like when we were talking about adherence to a plan of like using different tools or like how we were moving forward, and she just said, I have so many doctor's appointments, I just can't, not one more. I can't medicalize this. And that really helped me in creating a lot of this.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a place that people want to go.
Yeah.
Great. Like,
like when we expand again, I'm going to have a nap room because a lot of people come and they're like, it's so relaxing. I'm like, we just need a room that after treatment, everyone can go and like take a nap for an hour.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I can't wait. All right. So thank you for sharing that. Let's get into it. Teach me sex. So tell me about some of the ways that you have sex.
I have sex with myself. I have sex in my mind. I have sex with my partner if I have a partner at the time. So I am heterosexual. I have sex with tools and things. And I think that I also, I kind of define too, like sex and pleasure, that they're two different worlds. And, you know, like what pleasure looks like versus what sex looks like. And so I think that there's a lot of exploration. I mean, even as I've aged, you know, what tools I'm happy or comfortable using versus what I'm not, and kind of what partner, and you know, I think so. That's pretty much how I have sex.
Mm-hmm. I love that idea of like sex is like these are just like the activities that we do, but the pleasure is like a totally different question. You know, we can. I always say sex is mechanical. It's like you put this body part, you put this body part into this body part. But the question is, you know, what was pleasurable, or what did you find pleasurable? And I think a lot of times as medical providers, they're asking about the mechanics of it, like what. Well, if they don't assume that we're talking about like penis and vagina sex, you know, that aside, if that's not an assumption, then they're actually asking the questions of like what body parts goes into what other body parts. But how often are we asking like, well, did you enjoy it? Was it pleasurable?
So that's actually on our intake form.
Yeah.
So when we go through our initial intake with our clients, you know, whether there's questions about kind of bowel and bladder and sex, and on the sex part, you know, we say like, okay, well, is sex painful? Like, describe that. And then, do you enjoy sex?
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times you go to your provider, and unless, you know, if they say, is sex painful? You might say yes or no.
Right.
But you're right. It's not often asked, is sex pleasurable or enjoyable? And also, like, what does sex mean to you? Because again, you know, in a world where, you know, we're open to many sexualities and genders and in different ways of having, you know, intercourse, you know, it's not just penetration. Like sex for some people is oral sex or digital or
Right.
toys.
Right. Absolutely.
And on a washing machine for a little while.
Like, do you do oral? Do you enjoy it? Two separate
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
Great.
I was reading about dental dams yesterday for
Oh, yeah.
dental dams are like making a comeback because
Amazing.
I know, because they were talking about you know, oral sex in the anal rectal region, and like when you are less familiar with your partner and like how to keep yourself safe from different things. And I just think these are really fun, interesting conversations to return to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry,
That's
I diverged.
No, I'm all about dental dams. Okay. How are ways that you express yourself sexually? And like, why does that feel good for you?
How do I express myself sexually? I feel like this is really interesting for me to even kind of think about because, you know, I got divorced a year ago, and so being in that relationship versus being now as a single parent and how that looks for having sex, and who my partners are or partner. I'm one partner, um, and what that looks like. I think, you know, how do I express myself during sex? I think that there's different ways of looking at that. Are we talking about expression like facial expressions, like verbal expressions? Are we talking about like what I wear or what I don't wear, or like actions? Like how do I express myself
Yeah.
in a sex?
You know what I think is an interesting way to frame the question is, so it was, how do you express yourself as a sexual being? And so
Okay.
ways I've like reframed this is, how do you show the world that you're a sexual being? You know,
Just
is
got
it?
check the website.
Wait, that's hysterical.
I
I
mean,
know. I can.
I feel like when I'm on Pop Sugar talking about like orgasms and like squirting, that I am like projecting myself. I think
Yeah.
to flip the script on this, in the in the world of dating, sometimes I feel like I'm over sexualized. Like
Yes.
people read about what I do, and that implies that I must like certain things, that I'm like crazy sexual in some way, and that's not necessarily true or false. It's just something that I've had to kind of protect myself about, because there are a lot of people in the population that don't understand what I do, and they kind of like make it a kink, which I don't appreciate.
Right.
And so
Yes.
how I express myself sexually, to the world, I mean, I talk about sex all the time. I have like books on vaginas in my dining room above my dining room table, and I had pre us kind of shutting down a few weeks ago, I had a dinner party, and it was really funny because, there were different genders at the party and different sexualities, and people were like, all right, so it's Sam's dinner party. Like, when are we going to start talking about vagina sex?
I don't know anything about that. That never happens to me. I love this answer. I'm really curious. So I'm just going to ask the question again, but so what I'm hearing is you're talking about like the ways that the world sees you because of like what you do and how you talk and the books that you have in your house. And I'm just curious, if you kind of strip all that away and like you were to wake up in the morning and say to yourself, like, what actually does make me feel sexual or sexy, and it couldn't be the same answer, right? Like it can be like, well, the work and the advocacy that you do, but I'm curious, like, is there something else that maybe the world like sees these other things and it's something else like authentically to you? For me, it's like when I wear red, this is like how I show the world that I'm a sexual person. And I also have like the websites and tons of like, you can find me on YouTube talking about the rectum, like air sex, like, so
we are kin. I think my hair, I've always had like very long, crazy kind of curly hair. And I think that
Yeah.
that is a way that I show my like sexiness. And then if I'm not feeling that, you'll see my hair like buttoned up or tight.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Pre-mask, I'm always in red lipstick,
Okay.
like a red lipstick. I have my go-to, and I'm tall and I like to wear heels. But in all of that conversation, Kate, I think it's also important to say that like I continue to do work on myself, and in seeing myself in a sexual way like that, it's causing, with a lot of the dynamic of like feminism and the patriarchy and different conversations about that over the past few years that I've really continued to learn about. I think, do I think I'm sexy, or am I looking for validation from like what's been kind of we've boxed in that like that's sexy?
Right.
So I'm kind of trying to own different things. Like
Yeah.
for me, it's sexy. I box, and so like that's sexy.
Yes.
But I'm privately sexy in that. I don't like
Yeah.
share that. And so I
Right.
think there's a lot of different ways to answer that question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
I don't complicate this. I just want to like throw like yeah, I feel like a fox when I'm like, 6'2" and wearing red lipstick and my hair's down. But like I truly feel like a fox when I do that. But I'm also, now kind of thinking like, well, do I, like how was that shaped?
Yeah, exactly. And also, like I also think like when there is the cross section, you asking yourself the question of like, does this make me feel good, or does it not, like, and we have to kind of navigate that, because I think in a lot of ways, like, we can like keep some of that, but not all of it.
Like, I don't like to show it doesn't make me feel good. Like, I don't like to be like oogled in that way. Probably because I have in the past and I don't like it. And so like that doesn't make me feel sexy. But I think looks and how it makes you feel, like you said, are two different things.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's a whole host of the standard, and there's some standards that you may say like, nope, that's not it for me. Like, that doesn't make me feel good. And so choosing that is also like a really an act of autonomy that can also make you feel sexy too. But you're bringing up, that was really great. Thanks for bringing that up too. The part about like, patriarchy and messaging and conditioning, because those are things that we do have to think about.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us about a time where you felt really validated in a dating or a sexual experience. Where you felt really validated.
Give me an example of what you mean. Like,
so something that was like, it was a good sexual experience, and why was it? And was it something that someone did that made you feel good, or a dating experience that like went well? The next question is like, what was like one that you didn't feel validated, and why?
I think there is validation in somebody really, in having an experience that where someone was really trying to tenderly learn my body. That it wasn't a utility, and that there was care in learning that, and also kind of prepping with, I'm a consent person, and so like asking things like, is this okay? Does this feel good? Can I do this? Like not in an overkill kind of way, but I think that in that way, in that was very validating. Somebody, to have sex and then wake up in the morning and have someone say like, you look very beautiful in the morning, totally undone. That felt very to me. And then I think there are, I've had many non-validating experiences. I'm pushing 40 who's like, been sexual and different partners. And I think that there's, been experiences where, I've done things or faked an orgasm to just be like, this is, and I wish that 20 years ago I had that voice to be like, you know what, I don't want to do this. And I'm like, this doesn't feel good to me. But I didn't, and now I do. And I think that, there's a lesson there for me, but I think that I have had non-validating experiences or or even like the start of experiences. I was telling somebody the other day that there was this bar here in Baltimore. I used to know the bartender there. So I would always go on a first date there because she would be like, where you guys want to check? Like we had this thing going, and there was a guy that came once and he was very rude, and I was like, I don't want to have dinner. Like we can have this, beverage, but I don't want to have dinner. And he said, well, I took an Uber all the way here just for this. And I was so not validated by that. I was so like, turned off by that. That presumption alone was not positive for me.
Mm-hmm. So like the feeling of entitlement around your time, and like that's only if he can have that entitlement around your time, like what else is he going to have entitlement around?
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas I like having a partner that's like, trying to see you for who you are and appreciate that, like, that not all, and I think this comes with maturity and adulthood, that like not all sex looks the same. And if they're trying to explore you and kind of learn your body and learn how you're different, to really maturely say like, I did my homework, like lube is okay. Like, bodies are different. Postpartum is different. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like for partners, I think there's a lot of partner or people, right, where they feel pressured to just like be good in bed and to like know what women want or know what men want.
What is that? And that's so different. That is different for every person.
For all bodies.
Or it's different for, like, it's been different with me with different partners.
Correct. Over time. Absolutely.
Hormonal
yeah, so like all bodies, all genders, like there isn't a categorizing of like, oh, like this cross section of people want this in bed at this pace, at this depth, at this like speed, and it's just like, what? So like a really validating.
I feel like some definition, Kate, on like what is bad in bed. Like when someone's like all of a sudden like you're like, is this a rototiller? Like what's going on here? And then you're like.
No,
like,
absolutely.
I'm driving something to one of my friends, and she was like, "Oh, the DJ move," and I was like, "What's the DJ move?" And she's like, "When they just press so hard and they're just like going like this," and I was like, "What?"
Right? It's like, okay, that maybe that worked on the last one.
Yeah.
And you're right about like, so I can see how a really validating experience is just like for the first few times, or just like really slowing it down and kind of trying to read what's happening to the other person.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's our last question. So, teach me how to sex. So what is the Dr. Sam? Well, I guess probably this is better said. Like, what's the Sam special? What's like one tip, one move, one thing that you do, or like you could do that enhances the pleasure?
And I talk about this all the time, but I really think lubricant will make you or break you. Because there's so many junky lubricants out there that dry you out, that don't feel good. If you use too little or too much, like, that can cause an issue, your partner. But I feel like the way the body can glide and slide and how you can find and access different parts externally and internally with lube is magic in a lot of different ways. It is magic.
And I always say, I'm always like, lube should go everywhere, like knee to knee, belly button to butthole.
That's what I think. Nipples. I mean, like, imagine, like, you can put lube, like, on your chest and, like, slide a penis through your breasts. Like, there's a lot of different ways that you can use lubricant in a massage way. I mean, there's a lot. Mm-hmm. There's a lot there. And I think also that, it's millennials and Gen Z are great job with this, but destigmatizing toy play. I think if you're gonna have sex, or Dr. Sam, like the sex way, like, is to like find a toy, and it doesn't have to look like a giant purple like rotating dildo, but to find something that feels good that you can do in other ways. Like, you know, we have a bunch of vibrators here, and like you can put a vibrator under your chin while you're getting your
Mm-hmm.
butt rub and provide vibration. You can do nipple stimulation, ears, neck. Like it doesn't have to be intravaginal. It can be, on the external prostate area, like
Mm-hmm.
on the nail, or someone with a penis. Like there's a lot of different ways. And so I think that toys and lube are these accessories that we have available to us that we can play. Like we can make this pleasurable play. It's not this end goal of like somebody like squirts a bodily fluid and like we're done. Like it should be play. It's like
Like you do
adult.
this, you squeeze here, you honk here,
Yeah,
you turn the wheel
yeah,
here, and then like, you know, blow your
exactly.
engine. Like,
Exactly. I love that. Yeah. And so I think that, exploring those different things and then, that kind of like takes you into a different realm. Like if you show up with, you know, uh, now I tell people to put lube in like contact cases, like,
yeah.
or they have really little containers of like lubes all over the place or samples. And like, I think that excites people now. They're like, oh, well, like there's not the stigma there. Like, oh, if you're not wet, it means you're like not aroused. Like,
Right.
no,
Right.
like, that has nothing to do with it for a lot of people. It might help the arousal and help stimulation of the nerves initially, anyways.
Yes, absolutely. Like kind of kickstarting it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also,
The lubric. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think the third thing that I would add is to have sex with the lights on.
We're doing 3. Okay.
Doing 3.
No, we're getting 3 in.
We can work into it. You can start with lube, which
Okay.
feels like the most benign, and then you can toy with like light on or off, or using like a tool or a toy. But like I feel like that's kind of the package I would put together.
So lube, toy, sex with the lights on.
Correct.
I love that. Okay, why sex with the lights on?
Because you are a badass bitch and you look hot and you want to see your body doing this and you want to see your partner's body doing this. And like, we watch other people have sex in so many different ways. And we use that for pleasure. So we should watch ourselves engaging in this. And like, I think a lot of partners get really turned on by seeing their partner turned on by them. Like, it's like this nerve there. And also you can become the observer in this, not just the participator of what somebody likes, what you like. You can shift, you can move. But yeah, you're sexy. And so like you should have sex with the lights on. This isn't like tuck in and like turn the lights off and like hide. And it's sometimes sexy to have sex with the lights off.
Yes.
But I think, being uninhibited in that way is sexy in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talk about this all the time because body image plays such a block. And I always say like, my like, 2-second spiel on it is like, we receive pleasure through the sensory system. Body image is a cognitive process and receiving pleasure is like a somatic physical process. So those bodily systems like they're not even crossing, and we're putting them in the same category. And I like to challenge people and say like, what about, it's problematic that we often feel that our bodies need to be a certain shape or a certain way in order to engage in like sex and the pleasure process. And it's just a standard that we're creating that has tons of like messaging and conditioning around that. But really, it's just like at the end of the day, getting in the way of our pleasure. So having the lights on is this kind of way to kind of stand up against that and say like, hey, this is kind of hard for me and this is uncomfortable. But look, like I'm moving in this direction because this is a limiting thought that I have that's getting in the way of me having pleasure. And that all in of itself is sexy. Like that can be arousing and be a turn on turn on.
Yeah. And I think that like reclaiming ownership over our presence in this, that like we are not, like I as a heterosexual female am not a passive bystander in this. Like I'm not receiving something in that way that's like mechanical, like where we started off with the conversation. But I love some lights on.
Yeah. Awesome. So we're so grateful. Thank you for coming to the Teach Me Sex and kicking 2020 off right.
Thanks, Dr.
Thanks for sharing about yourself so that we can learn more about ourselves and learn about play and sex and communicating in a way that feels authentic to us just by you showing up and modeling what it looks like to be authentic to you as a sexual person. So thank you so much, Dr. Sam. And I'm excited for the next time.
What's next? Bye, Dr. Cates. Thank you.
Yeah.